All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ways and Means Committee meeting of Tuesday, November 17th, 2020. I call this meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. This meeting is being recorded by the Ways and Means Committee and GCTV. If anyone else present is doing the same, please notify me at this time. Seeing none, Councillor Bottomley, would you please do the roll call?
Yes, I'm Councillor Bottomley. I'm present. Councillor DeSorger.
I don't believe she signed on yet.
I'll come back. Councillor Elmer.
Here.
Councillor Forgy.
Here.
Chairperson Wheeler.
I'm here.
Great.
All right. Well, we do have a quorum, so we'll start off with the approval of minutes. Let's see, on page 3. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of September 15th and October 20th, 2020?
So move 4G.
Moved by Councillor Forgy, seconded by Councillor Elmer with his hand up,
Yes.
which I will accept. Any discussion on the minutes? They look good to me. So hearing none, all those in favor say aye or raise your hand, I guess. We all have our video on. I think I can see everyone. That's 4 hands. So the minutes pass unanimously. We have no public hearings, so we will go right into the FY21 tax classification on page 7 of your packet. I move that the City Council adopt a minimum residential factor of 1, resulting in an equal tax rate for all classes of property for the fiscal year 2021. Is there a second?
Second 4G.
Thank you. Is Acting Chief Assessor Kimberly Mew, and welcome, Kim. Would you like to give a brief introduction before we get started here?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Mew. I am the Assistant Assessor here in the City of Broomfield. And I am here tonight to just go over briefly the classification, as well as I have gotten a few questions from one of our counselors that I would also like to briefly just touch on as well.
Great, thank you. And I will now note for the record that Councillor DeSorger has signed on and is present. All right, does anyone on the committee have any questions that they'd like to start off on? I know many of you, actually, well, yeah, many of you, it's your first time doing this tax classification. We do this every year, and we do need to do it on schedule. If you don't have any questions yet, maybe Kim, you could answer the ones that came through email that you said.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So these are not 100% based on the classification hearing, so I just wanted to briefly answer these, and then, if there's further questions, providing time, we can sort of go from there. So the first question was a question about the TIF status of 201 Munson Street. The question said, in 2017, the value of the property was decreased by 50%. It went from 1.488800 to 780,400. And again, just for you, those of you who might be taking notes, that number again was 1,488,800, going down to 708,400. And then the question is, what made up their 1.557025 private investment? This person said that they see that there's a $95,000 amount of improvements, and what year are they in now in the TIF? So lots of questions there. So currently 201 Munson Street has a signed TIF with the city. It was a 10-year TIF, and it's currently in its 4th year. So at that moment, it means that the fiscal year 2021 taxes are getting a 70% reduction on the fair market value for this particular property based on this TIF agreement. And this agreement, just for those of you who don't know, a TIF is an agreement with the city to, it's a building that's bringing jobs to Greenfield. And so you make arrangements with the city and you get a small discount on your taxes. Generally, it's between 7 and 10 years. So those of you who just don't know what a TIF is, that's basically in a nutshell. So the 201 Munson Street is in its 4th year of the 10-year TIF at 70% of the fair market value. And just so you're aware, the following years will go down from there 10% each year. So next year it'll be at 60%, then 50, 40, so on and so forth. So if the applicant is not in compliance with the TIF agreement, the assessor's office will be notified, and we will not give them their TIF for that particular fiscal year. This has not happened yet to my knowledge when I've been in this position. So I would assume that they're able to fix whatever is wrong, and we can continue giving them that TIF in the future, but that's something that we'll come across if that happens. So as of right now, this TIF is in compliance as I am aware of. So they will be continuing to get the 70% this year and then continuing down with the reduction from there. Moving on to the next question, it was that...
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
Yeah, can you just explain what business they're in, what jobs they brought to the town, and why they got the TIF?
So I don't have the TIF directly right in front of me right now, so I can give you a brief overview of what I can remember. So this TIF was Decker Machine Works. So I can imagine there's a pretty significant amount of jobs that they've brought in, being a machine company. I apologize, I don't have that in front of me. I wasn't prepared to go too much into detail with that tonight. But it's certainly something that I can get for you if that is something of interest.
And thank you, Ms. Mew. And just for counselors' benefit, generally TIF questions should be directed at the Economic Development Committee, and those discussions should happen there. But thank you for answering that question, Kim.
No problem.
And I'll let you continue.
Also, just so everybody's aware too, I believe there is a TIF committee meeting coming up. So if someone is interested in going, I can get that information for you as well, if that's something you're interested in. So the next question, I apologize, I skipped the question as to if the applicant didn't meet the full requirements, what happens? And that's where I was going with the, they wouldn't get their exemption for the year, or their percentage off for the year. So the next question is that it says we are actually talking about classification. 46% of the town is rental units. This is a business for many. This person sees that 2 and 3 families, along with multifamilies, are listed in as residential. And the question is, do any municipalities count them as commercial properties? Can we or should we? And the answer to that is we cannot. That's a state requirement that we have to look at anything that is a residence as a residential property. So basically, a residential unit is constructed of a place where someone can live, and that can be as few as one unit, as many as a large apartment building. I understand the position where this looks like it's, it is someone's income, but it's a residence. It's where someone lives. So they would always receive the residential classification. And we have to look at them that way because that's the way the state mandates. That's just the way they, unless they change something, unfortunately, because it's a residence, it just gets looked at as a residential property. And then the last question that I got from email was, what is the latest date the classification needs to be determined by? Can this wait until December? There is no specific date that this has to be done by. So a city or town can push it back as far as they want. They can do it as early as they want, as long as the state approves their information. But you run a very large risk by pushing it back too far of not getting your tax bills out on time, which will make a significant impact on your city or your town, because if you don't have your income on time, then you could get into some serious trouble. For us specifically, if our bills go out late, that means our first real estate and personal property payments do not have to be into the office until May 1st. So if everybody in the city decided they wanted to wait and pay then, they can. They're not late. And we don't have any income except for maybe excise, parking tickets, and the little things like that. So we really need to push to get our taxes done on time. And in the past, I think some of you probably know, between all the things that were going on with computer situations, the split tax rate conversation, the collector and I, Kelly and I, both worked Christmas Eve a few years in a row to get this done for you. So we really don't want to do that again. So, understandably, if things don't go exactly the way they're supposed to go, that's okay. We still have a little bit of time, but getting them done as soon as possible is ideal, so we can have extra time to test the systems and just make sure that everything is running smoothly.
Very good. Thank you. Your concerns are duly noted. Do counselors have questions or comments, discussion of any kind?
Actually, I have a question. I don't know if it's appropriate for this particular time, but I have a question about assessing.
Sure.
Because we had, in one of the last meetings, you went through the complex set of factors that go into assessing property values. Mm-hmm. And still, I'm concerned about some commercial properties that, based on those criteria, that I still am not. I think we talked a lot in generalities, mm-hmm. And I know I have a specific property, and even if it's not tonight, but like 347 Wells Street is one example that I feel like I'm missing something. It seems kind of egregious that a property that's over 3 acres big is assessed at $143,000, yet a couple of years ago was $337,000. So I'm just concerned that as we determine whether we're going to try to do a split tax rate, it's kind of relevant if these commercial properties are actually going down in value by mm-hmm. quite a bit.
So I think this is a very relevant question. We can briefly touch on that property just because that's the specific one that you're talking about, but it goes in hand with the commercial, with the split tax rate conversation. This particular property I obviously know very well because we've been talking about it lately, and something that I believe we touched on in the Board of Assessors meeting on this specific property is that you look at the land as well as the buildings that are on it. In this case, unfortunately, since the buildings are in such terrible shape, they're dragging down the value of the property. So back a couple of years ago when it was up in the $300,000 range, those buildings might have been in better shape. Without looking exactly at the record card, I don't want to give you exact, this is what happened, because I don't want to have any facts wrong, but for this specific one, I think there's something to that nature going on there as well. But also, a along the business side of things, this particular property seems as though that it has a couple of businesses potentially running on it. The trick with that one is there's a lot of vehicles, and vehicles you can't tax in personal property tax unless they don't have license registration. So if it's a farm vehicle that literally never leaves the farm, like it's a tractor or something, you can tax them on that in personal property. But if it has a license plate, then they're already getting a tax. So personal property is in lieu of an excise tax bill, and vice versa. Excise tax is in lieu of personal property. And that goes for all of us as well with just our regular vehicles. So what I mean by going hand in hand with the split tax rate is speaking about properties that are commercial in our city. I have no issue whatsoever if we decide that we want to do a split tax rate. That's completely up to you guys. I'm happy to do it either way. This year, though, I'm a little concerned because we haven't had a chance to really sit down and talk about the facts and the, what happens if, and the scenarios of, what if we do this right here and this right here. So there's a lot of work left to be done if that's what we decide to do. And I'm worried that that's going to push our tax rate back. But mostly I'm worried about our commercial properties because we have a very fragile commercial industry in Greenfield at the moment. And so I just worry that if we do a split tax rate, being that the residential properties in Greenfield make up almost 76% of our city. And so that leaves just under 26%, 25% of the rest of the properties being commercial properties. And you think, okay, well, that doesn't sound so bad, right? But look at our downtown. There's a lot of vacancies. And what I worry that would happen is, yes, we say, okay, 25% of our town is commercial, but they're classified as commercial. Are there actually businesses in those places? So that's what worries me a little bit right now about the split tax rate. So this property and that question, John, definitely goes in hand together. I certainly would be happy to sit down and talk with you either one-on-one or through email or, in a different meeting more in detail, I think, about that situation. But I think that sort of answers your question as well as ties it into the classification as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I will jump in here basically to agree with what Ms. Muse said. There's two parts to it. First, I believe generally any robust conversation around adopting a split tax rate has to begin with a split tax rate committee that's formed months in advance of the tax classification hearing. And obviously that was not done this year. And so what I've said every year is that if a split tax rate want to seriously look at, then it needs to be studied. Probably we have to start in the summer. Appropriate for Greenfield at this time, that generally a city that would adopt the split tax rate, because quite frankly, there's some room there and there's some negotiating power. So if we were in a place where business was booming and we could afford to lose a few commercial businesses to kind of give a break to residences, then I could certainly support it. But I don't think that's the environment we're in. I don't think we want to hit any businesses any harder than they're already hit, being that we're in a pandemic. So I support going with the Sether's recommendation of adopting a single rate. Any other discussion or questions from councilors? Councilor Elmer.
Yeah, this may not be appropriate for this committee, but Kim, if I could ask, I remember the last time we spoke to you, I asked you if you had some sense of how much money we were leaving on the table by not aggressively revaluating property. I don't think you ever got back to me with that. And in retrospect, I realize it's a very hard figure to come up with. But I do, from hearing what Councilor Desoria has found, I do get the sense that there is money on the table that we're not collecting by properly or fairly valuing the properties. And I guess I have some questions about how that is done. I understand in the past, and maybe this is before you came on board, that we had a company that not only kept the database but also went and looked at properties. Patriot something.
Patriot Properties, yes.
Yeah. Do we have something like that now? Is there a company that's looking at property, or is that totally fallen on your department's shoulders?
So we still have Patriot Properties. They are actually our database, but that is the only thing that they do currently. They do that other things for other towns where they do the inspections and such, but here in Greenfield, they just are the keeper of our data. And we have RRG. And I think that I certainly do not want to discount anyone's work from Patriot Properties, but I really strongly believe that we honestly have a phenomenal group of people working with us. Not only have they been a massive help to me as I learned through this job, but they've been a significant asset in so many other directions. And one of those things is our values. I believe that their inspections are the most honest, truthful. The experience that they've brought here with their inspections is great. That the many years that they have done these inspections. So I'm not trying to just boost them, but I just I'm trying to build your confidence that we really have a great thing right now. And so if things were done differently in the past, the way they're being done right now, I think is a strong, confident change.
May I follow up?
Yes.
So give me a sense of, can you give me a sense of how many, we have like 6,000 properties. How many properties a quarter or a year are being inspected by these folks?
So I can't give you an exact number at the moment, but I would, by state requirements and law, we have to look at a quarter of the town every year. So I would say we're trying to do that. It's fantastic if we can get more than that. That's the goal. This year obviously has been a little bit more difficult because of the situation that we're in, but I would say in a normal circumstance that should be the average, is to try to look at a quarter. And right now, especially with the request and the money set aside for the commercial and industrial reval, that's a big part of what they're doing as well. And we've looked at a lot of properties and are continuing to do studies on those.
One last one. If what resources would you need to do? I mean, the state mandates that you do a quarter of the property every year. I get the feeling you're not quite sure that you're doing that, and I'm asking what would you need from us to do that, to meet that requirement?
It's not necessarily that I don't think that we're doing that. I just don't want to give you a number and not have it be exactly the amount of properties that we're looking at. Meaning, we have over 6,000 parcels. So, and I don't know that exact number off the top of my head. So I hate to just give you a number and have it be totally bogus. So that's all I mean by that. But I would say we're absolutely meeting our state requirements. And if we don't, especially next year, we have our reval, the state will come in and we will get in quite significant trouble. And if the state doesn't think that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, they'll take over and bill us, and they don't care what our budgets are and what money we have. Mm-hmm. So we have to follow. We can't not follow them. So I apologize for not being able to give you exact numbers, but that's, basically in a nutshell, we have to follow that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Question from Councilor Forgy.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My question is following up on Phil's, which is twofold. Number one, Patriot Properties maintains our database. What does that mean?
So maintain is a word that you can take in many directions there. What I mean is I maintain the database by, being in there every day. They hold the data. So that is the software system that we use. So I guess maintain was probably the wrong word, so I apologize for that.
No, software. Now, here's my question. And so you are actually saying that the software system that holds our data is not compatible with whatever RRG is putting out at this point?
No.
Why two separate? That's what I want to know. Why are there two separate companies involved in this?
So Patriot is involved in many communities, but not all. Patriot Properties, their main source, right, like what they do every single day is their software. They used to do a lot more inspections and sort of in a sense they would be there right side by side with the assessor during the whole year and especially during the end for classification and setting the tax rate and all that stuff. And they've sort of pulled back from that. So I don't know, I can't really speak for them as to whether or not that's just something they don't want to do anymore or what's going on there. But the difference between them and RRG is RRG doesn't have software. They're actual people that come out, they'll do the inspections, they'll work side by side with you. They have someone that specializes in, as I mentioned before, I think they have specific people that specialize in chapter. They have specific people that specialize in TIFs, solar, appellate tax board cases, so on and so forth. I can keep going. So the difference basically is just one is specifically for software, and one is actual people that are working with us side by side.
And can you tell me from a budgetary point of view, how much is that?
How much is
How
what?
much is the paying for the services provided by both Patriot and RRG? Budgetary.
I don't have those numbers directly in front of me right now.
Okay.
If we're looking to have Patriot Properties do the work that RRG does, I don't know. That's something we would have to actually reach out to them for because I don't know, one, if they will still do something like that for a community at our size. A lot of the communities that they do are little tiny towns.
Okay.
And what that cost would be, because that's probably different than what it was way back when.
I have another follow-up if I could. Is there a scenario in the future that would enable all of this to be produced by Greenfield so that the software system itself is something that Greenfield installs and owns? And okay.
Nope, that's if we do something like that, it's going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, okay.
Then if we need help with something, there's nowhere to go. So I highly doubt that we would do anything like that.
Okay, and to just extend it one more time, and I thank everybody's patience here, including yours. So my again, what budgetary pieces would have to be in place in order for us to become more aggressive in addressing some of the issues that have been brought forward? In other words, would more personnel in your office be helpful?
Sorry, that's at my house.
Okay.
We're good.
Smoke alarm?
I think it's the oven. I'll be right back. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. All right, we're gonna talk amongst ourselves for.
And you were worried
for a
about my
moment.
dog. At least my house.
I'll be
is
right
not-
back too.
Okay. All right. Well, it's a little too early for a recess, but if anyone needs to take a minute. Well, we got the fire chief on the line, so
Yeah,
there's
right.
nothing to worry
That's
about,
the
right?
alarm
Chris, we'll be
going.
right there.
Well, except she lives in Turner's Falls, but okay.
I'm back. Sorry, we have really, really sensitive system, and my husband was cooking pizza for my son. So sorry about that.
Don't worry about it.
Cool.
Glad you're okay.
It's better than naked people in your Zoom.
This is right.
I heard it and thought it was a feedback. All right. Okay.
Okay, so
This,
the
yeah.
question, what would enable your office to be more aggressive in terms of trying to put trying to you up to okay, so how do we get on top of this? How do we crack this all? And my question would be, what would your budgetary needs or personnel needs be?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Go ahead. Do what you have
That's
to do.
the smoke detector.
All right. I hope GCTV's got this. It's a real action shot.
Otis, I'm going to have another question when she comes back.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll let her answer the one that's hanging if she can remember what it is, and then I'll call on you.
Can ever get it out of her mouth without the alarm going off.
Okay.
Yes,
All
I'm
right.
really sorry.
Please don't worry about it. Catch your breath.
Stop my heart.
Yeah. I'm just glad it's only pizza. I hope you didn't burn it.
I hear the beating, so it must be nothing. It's just a sensitive system.
All right. Well, that means it's effective. Well, I'm going to use my privilege as chair to rephrase the question slightly and ask you to answer. Do you identify areas of improvement?
Mm-hmm.
And if so, do you see ways in which further appropriations to your office could make improvements?
So I think that at the moment we have a pretty good grasp on the commercial industrial, and I know I keep going back to the reval, but we have a pretty good grasp on where we're going with that, what we're doing. It is something that's going to take a little bit of time because of there's a lot of parts to it in order to get it exactly where we want it to be. And if we just go ahead and slam dunk with an update, it's going along with the split tax rate. Like, we may lose some people, and we don't want to do that. We care very much about the residents as well. So I just want to make that clear, that it's not just about the commercial properties. So I think, handle wise, I think we have a good idea of where we're going. Aggressively, looking at some of these things that have been brought to our attention, a lot of them we have actually already either begun looking at or looked at and fixed, or so on and so forth. So I think, at the moment, we're actually really in a good place. I think some of the concerns that have been brought to my office's attention actually are something that the assessor's office doesn't have jurisdiction to look at, to address. And in those cases, in many cases, I've actually said, it's an enforcement issue, it's a licensing issue, it's whatever the case is, so that the person who's requesting can, reach out to those people if that's where they want to go with that. I'm not going to say that having another person in the office would be a horrible thing, because obviously everybody would like to have, more people. But depending on a lot of pieces, the assessor's office is getting a lot of work coming up with PACE, with the Community Preservation Act, with all these TIFs that are happening. It's just adding a little bit. There's a couple of other things that are just happening that are giving us more to do. So either, maybe start out first with having 2 full-time people instead of 1. certainly, I recommend that we keep RRG around for a little while. I understand that people want to have people employed by the city instead of a company employed by the city, but I just can't stress enough how much RRG is bringing to our city and how much they are helping us just by having all these resources. They're also, you look at it as, oh, but we're paying them this much money. But if we didn't have them, we would have to be paying for an attorney if we have any ATB cases to, help us with those cases. So on and so forth. I won't go too far into detail, but I just think that having them stick around for a while is really important. And then again, in a perfect world, of course, at least starting out with 2 full-time people or almost full-time people, just a little bit more than what I have. Obviously, I don't want to burden people with having a massive budget and having to uprate, the tax rate and all that. But, start out with just a little and see where it goes. And if it's helping, add a little bit more, just do a little at a time, I think. But as for just a little security, I think we really are headed in the right direction. And I think we're moving forward pretty quickly.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay, we've got a few people, but I'm going to recognize Director Gilman here in case there was something that you want to add.
I just wanted Kim, if she could, talk a little bit about the levy limit, which we are capped at each year, and the impact of more value or more valuation, because I've heard leaving money on the table. I think it's more what you're talking about is a more equitable distribution, not necessarily money on the table. But Kim, do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, well, I can ask you guys if you look at page, oh boy, I mixed up all my pages. I think it's page 3. It starts at the top with terminology in your classification package. If you go down to where it says fiscal year 2021 levy limit and the amount to be raised, which is in bold, something that just very briefly to look at, you'll see your levy ceiling and your levy limit. And there's a little bit of a difference there. And we do this because we don't want to tax at the absolute, top of the moon, because that hurts people. We know that. And if we don't absolutely have to have that money, although it's nice to have what you and I would call a savings account. So if you have to fall back on, it's not really something that we want to practice. So also looking at all these numbers right here on this page, think about if your values on the property are increasing, assuming everything works the way it's supposed to, your tax rate's going to come down. Mm-hmm. So the more and more we spend time working on our values and with our commercial industrial, finishing up that reval, updating our cost tables so that, our commercial properties are, higher in value. The more we focus on, sales of properties. If a group, for example, if Capes are all of a sudden all selling for between $300,000 and $400,000, and we have them assessed at, $200,000, we've got some work to do. So we need to focus on that. And so along the lines of what Liz is talking about, if we can focus on all that stuff and get all those values up to in good shape, our tax rate is going to come down because these numbers are going to adjust. We need to make the same amount of money, but we're doing it in a different way rather than taxing your dollars as, we're collecting it because your assessment is higher.
Thanks. I'm going to recognize Director Gilman, and then I'm going to try to move on because we do need to cover other topics. And Liz, you're on mute, I guess. Oh, wait.
Sorry. Try to keep it on mute. So just because your the tax rate comes down, when your value comes up, your tax bill does not change. folks. So it's a reciprocal relationship.
Right.
So that's where I was going with all of that, and having Kim explain about that, because why it's good to have our overall value up higher in terms of EQV and debt limit and all that. Your levy limit is driven by the levy from the prior year.
Right.
And not the value. So, again, your tax bill isn't going to change. Your your value goes up, your rate goes down. And this, I'm saying even across the board. It doesn't happen evenly. But your tax rate goes down, the value goes up, your tax bill stays the same, because you're still raising the same amount of money for your budget.
Right.
So I know it's another conversation, but I don't want us to get lost in the idea that we're leaving a lot of money on the table.
Yeah, thank you, Director Gilman. That's noted. Very much noted. I don't want us to get lost in the weeds here. I do think it's wishful thinking to believe that assessing will change the general picture of the taxation in Greenfield. I think the perception of that there's a tax rate that people can't pay has to do with incomes, and it has to do with the actual condition of the actual properties in the city. But I'm glad that we are giving it the attention it deserves, and I'll take a question or two more if we have them. But I would like to get to a vote on this because we do have a number of things to address tonight. So, any more questions? Councillor Forgy.
It's just informational. Who are the members of the EDC?
Off of the top of my head, at least two of them are on this committee.
Okay, that would be nice to know.
I can answer.
Yes, Councillor Elmer, please.
Okay, there's me, there's Councillor DeSorger, there's Tim Dolan, who's the chairman, and the fireman,
Councillor Jarvis.
Councillor Jarvis, I think. Is that five? Oh, and then Hirschfeld.
Yeah.
Right.
And Councillor Elmer, did you have a question?
I just, is Kim still here?
Yes.
Yeah, Kim, the last time we talked about this, we had a little back and forth about, someone said, well, we can't, some people won't open their door for the inspector. And I said, well, you could get a court order, but that wouldn't scale very well. But I would be very interested if you guys started keeping a list of the properties that refuse entry to the assessors. I'm not sure what we do with that, but I would be very interested to know who's not cooperating.
So just on a quick note, we do something sort of to that nature. If we send out notification to do an inspection, for example, of a neighborhood, we will put a note in everyone in that neighborhood's, we have an activity section on our record card. So if you asked for someone's record card, you would see in the activity the recent work that we've done to their property. So an inspection, a permit visit, a field review, so on and so forth. And it would say something like that in there. Generally, if we actually physically make a connection with someone and they say to us, no, you can't come in, we will note that on the record. I know what you're saying, though, as to pulling a report to look at those people. I don't know that I could do that based on using that. But certainly something to actually think about. That might be an interesting study to do.
Thank you.
Councillor DeSorger.
Thank you very much. I think I totally agree with the people that have spoken. This is a year that we need, I feel that we need to keep at a single tax rate with a factor of 1 for everyone, because our businesses are having a hard enough time. One thing that I do think that in the town that I came from, when we needed to build new things in town, people, if people weren't letting people in, their assessment was raised if there had been other sales in the neighborhood. And then after that, if they had a problem with it, they could then file for an abatement, at which point you had to let someone in. So that would not be an excuse for not raising assessments if they needed to be done in a certain area. And I do think that you're doing a good job, but that we do have some that need to be raised up. And by doing so, I think you have one of the most important jobs here in the city, which you are trying to do a great job with that every single day. But I think that there are some that we need to get up a little higher, because it's time to do that, and it will help the entire community. But I do think that I'd go for the factor of 1.
So I can just very quickly respond. Thank you for your kind comments. But also, I'm not sure how the other town was doing that, but we can't just bump people's values. There has to be sort of some degree of a study as to why we're doing that, because the state's going to go, well, what happened there? And we can't just say, oh, well, we wanted it to be higher, because they'll smack us on the hand. And I know that's not exactly what you were saying, but we, with every type of property at the end of every year, we do have to do a study of, we break it down using, again, residents. We will break it down of single family homes, and then we'll break it down even farther to the type of home. We break it down to the neighborhood. As you know, I'm getting a lot of public records requests, and so I'm seeing a lot of these record cards just coming through, whether I'm printing them or whether I'm emailing them through the system to someone. And so I noticed some neighborhoods are higher than others, and so something that we can certainly look at. I greatly appreciate everyone's concern and want so badly to, raise more money, and so I, will do the best that I can to try to do that in a manner that the state won't be angry with us, and in a manner of fair and equitable everyone in the city.
Thank you, Ms. Mew, and thank you for answering all the questions from the subcommittee. I doubt we'll have any more on the next 2 orders, but you never know. Is there any discussion amongst the committee before we vote on this matter? Councillor Elmer?
Just the language of it, that we're voting on no small commercial exemption. Tell me what that means.
I happily will, but I'm going to wait until we get to it.
Okay. Oh, that's not what we're doing?
Yeah, we're doing them one at a time, and we're on the top one on, I think it was page 7. Is that it? The minimum residential, the factor of 1. And so this is just voting, finalizing a single tax rate. So any more discussion on the tax rate? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to take a roll call vote. This is a yes vote would adopt a residential factor of 1 for an equal tax rate for all properties in fiscal year 2021. Councilor Bottomley, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. I will vote yes. Councilor DeSorger?
Yes.
Councilor Elmer?
Yes.
Councilor Forgy?
Yes.
Councilor Wheeler?
And I vote yes. All right. Thank you, everyone. It passes unanimously. We have a single tax rate for FY 2021. I move that it be ordered that the City Council votes that no residential exemption be adopted for fiscal year 2021. Is there a second?
So moved.
Seconded by Councilor Forgy. And we'll have discussion on this now. I will start, if that's all right, by just noting that a residential exemption essentially for anyone who doesn't know, exempts the first $100,000 of the home, I believe was my understanding. We've looked into it casually in the past, and it's really only adopted in communities that are either big cities, Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, or tend to have a lot of vacation homes. So only, I believe, 18% of communities in Massachusetts have a residential exemption. It is a progressive tax. It hits bigger houses hard. And my understanding, having looked into it, is that it probably would hit people who are maybe house proud and cash poor, of which we have, I think, many in Greenfield. It would hit them pretty hard. So when I came on council, I kind of had some support for this. I've yet to see that it is necessary or the right thing for Greenfield, and I have the same opinion that I do of a split tax rate, which would be that for council to responsibly vote a residential exemption, it should appoint a committee to study it a few months in advance. But that's just my opinion. So is there any discussion or questions for anyone from finance or assessing? Councilor Elmer.
I assume that if there was such an exemption and that the money would be made up by a higher tax
Yes.
on the bigger properties. Okay.
Exactly, and that's why it's a rather large shift. And so, while it would be nice to take some of the burden off the people with the smaller homes, it would hit the people with the bigger homes pretty hard.
Let me just say, I'm not sure that's a bad idea, but I hear you that it would take, if we're going to do it, you got to do some planning and have a committee. All right, let me think about that.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Can I just
Yes,
give an
please.
example too, just for everyone? Recently at a class that I had gone to before COVID, someone was from the Cape, and they were actually talking about this specific thing. And he said in his town, it was a very small town, and I don't remember off the top of my head where it was. It was just before the Cape. He said that he had a handful of people that actually lived there. So they would get this residential exemption, and then everyone else was second homes. So there's just a different direction to look at it, as we, I think, have 99% full-time residents in Greenfield. So just don't want to hurt our residents any more than, we have to. Not that we want to, but we just don't, we don't want to add any more burden to your pockets, especially this year.
Yeah, thank you. And that lines up with my experience in the city as well, like in Boston, where, you might make $400,000 a year and actually have a hard time, purchasing a residential property, so they have the residential exemption to keep it from being a city where only investors can own. But I am also kind of, I do see where it's something that could be looked at. All right. Any further discussion on that?
So I just wanted to clarify. So a yes vote means no residential exemption.
Yeah, that's the way the order is written. Thank you for clarifying that one. Okay. So, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of no residential exemption, say aye. Aye.
Right.
Aye. There's 5 hands. That's unanimous. There will be no residential exemption. I move that the City Council votes that no small commercial exemption be adopted for fiscal year 2021. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Councilor 4G seconded. Discussion? This is similar to the residential exemption. Actually, applies more to businesses, I believe. Even Councilor Elmer. Oh, you're muted.
Where it's not clear to me where these motions are coming from.
Page 7 in your packet, if you have the newest packet. Oh, I see.
I do have the packet. Sometimes they say they're coming from the mayor.
Yes.
Yes, that's my question.
These are made every year as part of the tax classification hearing coming from the assessor's office and the Board of Assessors.
Okay, thanks.
If I may just quickly explain sort of what this one is. This one is sort of exactly the same as the residential, except that it is for commercial. So if we have a split tax rate, this kind of goes hand in hand with it, because if you have a split tax rate, just looking at your main street, your downtown, a lot of the mom and pop places, just off the top of my head, the thrift shops, Barney B's, at the nail places, things like that, they may fit into this category of being able to get an exemption of that. And so basically they would just pay the same tax rate as the residential properties. So this is, if we do decide to do a split tax rate, this would definitely be something that you want to look at the same time, because if you're doing the split tax rate and you're going to allow this, you then need to do a totally different study on, okay, how many of those small mom and pop places will actually be paying the residential tax rate, and how many are left? Is it worth doing the split tax rate? So just a thought, just to sort of explain what that is as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a great summary of that. If we were so lucky as to have, some huge employer come into the city that completely just changed the dynamic, and we did adopt a split tax rate, then that would probably be essential, I think, in order to exempt the mom and pops, like Kim said. But any other discussion or questions on this piece? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of no small commercial exemption, raise your hand. And that's 5 hands, so it is unanimous. There is a single tax rate with no residential exemption and no small commercial exemption. Thank you, Kim, for coming tonight. I think you're off the hook unless I'm forgetting about something.
Thank you for having me, and I apologize for giving you all heart failure and a show of leaving the door.
Not at all. That was the most entertainment.
Takeout, so we don't have to deal with that.
Very good. Don't worry about it. I like the entertainment. All right, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move now to page 13 in your packet. Do I have a volunteer to read this motion?
I'll volunteer.
Thank you.
Okay. Order number fiscal year 21-0229. The City Council, upon recommendation of Mayor Wiedegardner, in order reduce fiscal year 21 general operating budget appropriation. Ordered that to reduce the fiscal year 21 general fund operating budget appropriation of $53,879,442 by the amount of $370,000 for a revised fiscal year 21 operating budget total of $53,509.4. Is that correct? No, it's comma 442. 53,109,442 is to be raised. I think that should be and appropriated, raised and appropriated, and $400,000 transferred from parking meter receipts for fiscal year starting July 1, 2020 and ending June 30, 2021. The following accounts are to be reduced. 132 reserve fund, $25,000. 155 technology MIS, salary and wages, 22,000. 197 energy expenditures, 12,000. 213 dispatch, salaries and wages, 50,000. 220 fire department, salary and wages, 46,000. 220 fire department expenditures, 14,400, for a subtotal of, let's see, 103,600. No, am I reading that? I hope so. And then we have 4 departments, 411, 422, 438, 425, public works salaries. There's, okay. Public works expenditures, 16,600. 191 central services, salaries and wages, $14,100. 191 central services, expenditures, $1,000. 192 central maintenance expenditures, $16,300. 491 cemetery expenditures, $13,500. 603 recreation, salary and wages, $20,500. 912 workers' compensation insurance, $15,000, for a total of $370,000. Total reduction.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second, Elmer.
Seconded by Councilor Elmer. All right. So I imagine there will be some discussion and some questions here. I know that at one point we had the mayor on the line, and I believe we still do. We have Director Warner on the line. This is something that is necessary to do to balance the budget. And my question certainly is, what are the effects on services? So I guess I will start by addressing the mayor. Mayor, could you, and you can throw this question to a department head if you like, but could you begin by outlining your understanding of what the effect to services are, and exactly how much grass will not be cut because of these cuts? Oh, you're on mute.
I was going to say, once I unmute, I can. I will let Marlo speak on that because he may have a better grasp on the day-to-day. You're right. We do have to do this. I guess the way I look at it is we did not reduce staff at this point in time. These are people that, in the salary piece, these are people that were not hired. So obviously they were put in the budget because we thought we would need them down the line. And so therefore but we also knew that 2021 of all years was going to be pretty difficult. We assumed, I mean, we have to go on how we look at the budget and what the impacts might be as we move along. And this has been a year of challenges, as everybody understands. So in anticipation of that, we did ask the department where some of their new hires, their part-time people that they bring on and so forth and so on, if they could wait either till later in the year to hire them or not hire them at all once we found out where we were with our budget and what we might need to cut to get it balanced, then that would be what I would instruct them to do. And they did that. So the effect going forward, I guess, needs to be looked at both in a, how shall I say it, a long-term and a short-term view. The short-term is now where we are, we need to do this. The long-term is what will happen further out. We still have numbers coming in, Liz can address this maybe a little better than I, that are showing some positive things in the community and on our budget side. But that doesn't mean we still don't have to make these cuts. So I like to think of it as we have truly, and I hope everyone understands this, one of the best DPW departments to a person in Western Massachusetts and certainly in Franklin County. They are top-notch people. Sorry, we're losing one, but we'll fix that too. So we're used to this in this city of them being Johnny on the spot, doing everything every day. They do it at 105%, whereas other towns not so much. So I feel like if the grass doesn't get, they're going to get to it because that's what they do, and they'll work with the staff that they have. I have every confidence in that, and Marlo and I have talked about that. But if they get there a little bit later, or if the Beacon Field is a little shaggy around the earlobes, that sort of thing, that's just the way it's going to be for a while, but they will get to it. So I feel like the impacts will be more of an image, not so much an image thing, that's not correct. The impacts will be more that people will notice that things are happening a little slower. But I think by and large, people will not particularly notice at all. If we have and there may be ways that Marlo within his budget with, new information comes in every day, including savings in various line items and so forth. If there is a way within his budget that he can move some people around and hire later on, fine. We just wanted to be very cognizant of the fact that when you hire people, you're not just hiring them to pay them a wage, you're paying their salary, or pay them a salary or their wage, you're paying for their health care, their retirement, et cetera, et cetera. We don't want to take on that burden along with everything else. Now, part-time people are a little different, unbenefited people. But we didn't want to take on the burden of doing that in, say, July, August, and have to let them go, which is also an expensive proposition in now. So I think the impacts, while they sound great, in impact, are not going to be noticed or be as bad as everybody might think. Now, I will let, certainly, whenever you're ready, Marlo address that in a way that maybe he, who has the day-to-day, can enlighten you a little bit on. And then if you want Liz to also discuss it, that's fine. But that's the way I have been thinking about it. That's the way Liz and I have been talking about it. And as I say, Marlo knows how to get 105% out of the people that he's working with, and they do it because they like their jobs and they love Greenfield. You're on mute.
Happens to all of us, doesn't it?
Yes.
All right. We do have a question from Councilor Forgy, but I'm going to let us pursue this piece first, and just basically welcome Marlo Warner, the director of the DPW. And Director Warner, would you answer the question that, presuming these are positions that we will be able to hire for next year, hoping, crossing our fingers, what would be the short-term impacts to the department of these cuts?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. I think the mayor did a fine job of summarizing what we've been talking about. So, it's the short-term impact and the long-term impact of these budget cuts that, they're miles apart. As silly as this may sound, COVID put us in this position, but COVID also allowed me to comb the budget and find some things that were helpful to the budget cuts that didn't create any further layoffs, or didn't create layoffs, I should say. So the short-term impact, just to elaborate a little bit on what the mayor had said, we don't know where COVID's going, where it's bringing us, what it's going to look like in the spring. And I think what it looks like in the spring is going to be I think we're going to find out exactly what the impacts are. Now, when I say that, we will probably be getting some things a little slower. If everything's back to normal, we prep tennis courts, we prep the swimming area, we clean up from winter, and that's another key thing. Depending on the harsh winter, that also makes it dependent on how long it takes to get through that process. So I think we're used to the exact dates, and I think we've done a fine job of hitting them dates year after year after year. June 1st, the clay tennis courts are usually done, so on and so forth. We were a little slower this year only because of COVID, and we were tending to many other things for the city through the COVID process. So I think in short term, anything can happen any given day in public works with emergencies, storms, etc. But in the short term, I feel confident that we're going to be okay. I think going into spring is going to be most important. And I want to back the bus up to April or May. I think Liz and I were having these discussions back in April and May. We all were. And I think Liz brought it to the council's attention. Right out of the gate, July 1st, I put not zero spending in place with all the departments, but basically anything outside of essential spending, had to be approved through myself or the deputy director. So I think at the end of the day, that was a good move. We got a lot accomplished in the DPW through this process. I'm very proud of the crew and everybody really giving it their all. So short-term impacts, we get through, June 30th, July 1, we're okay. I think the long-term impacts are another whole discussion as I build the new budget coming up in a couple weeks. The couple of positions in the summer help long-term certainly would, if you will, show its impacts and slow to provide services going forward after July 1. I think there's no one has a crystal ball, but we'll continue to do what we do when we can. But I would expect that come spring, the grass is going to be a little higher. It's not going to be at 1.5 inches at all times. We're going to have taller grass. I'm sure we're going to get to the swimming area. And I saved enough budget in the materials and whatnot to make sure that we had, if you will, the comfort foods that the community has come to expect to have, especially through COVID. Mainly the swimming area, the parks and playgrounds. Again, we may be a little slow to making repairs there, or doing the wood chips to spread the wood chips to meet, code. I think the process slows down, which is a big change for me, I must say. But, I think we're going to be okay. Like I said, no one has a crystal ball, but in a normal year, the short-term impacts would be significant. But being the situation we're in, I believe that short-term will be okay. But long-term, I think it's most important that we can reinsert some of these things, especially the salaries and wages and a few positions we may need going forward. But with that being said, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Director Warner. And yeah, hopefully we'll have a more robust discussion around the long-term piece during the budget process for FY22. But Councillor 4G, did you want to ask your question now, or should we finish with the DPW line first?
It's fine to continue with DPW. That makes sense. Thank you.
All right. Anyone with questions or comments about the DPW piece? Councillor Bottomley?
Yeah, Director Warner, I was wondering if you could tell us how many summer positions are lost from this, if you've got an approximate.
Okay, salaries and wages is 2 FTEs, full-time employees, and the summer help is two summer help, 2 temp help, we call them. One in the highway traffic division and one in the parks division is how it works out in the account numbers.
Okay.
And just to the mayor's point, I don't want to go on and on, but you know, we have a very large department. There's movement, there's bumping through the union, collective bargaining agreement. Sometimes people leave. So when that happens, there's always a delay in bringing a new person aboard. So I wanted to point out that we're actually going through one of those processes now. You can't always depend on that. You don't always lose an employee through the year, but when you do, you gain a little bit of salary, if I may put it that way. There's a delay depending on the buyout when the employee leaves for benefits. But if I can make up, and again, I make no promises here, we don't know what's going to happen, but I may be able to make up the summer help and do some transfers working with Liz early spring, so we can get on top of that and get the summer help hired in when we need them to start. It's very difficult after July 1st. So I have contingency plans here. It's just a matter of how this plays out this winter and what it looks like coming into, say, February or March, and see what we're looking at.
Very good. Councillor 4G, you have a question?
Yes, I do. So I've heard people this evening describe this as a short-term cut. My question to you, Director Warner, is would you need the budget restored in the next fiscal year, particularly in light of the fact that DPW will be involved in the temporary fire station building process, where my understanding is that DPW will be doing a lot of infrastructure work for us?
That's a great question. So, you know, we're dealing with budget cuts here in the general operating budget. As we all know, it's the general budget. I also have a water and sewer enterprise budget that has its personnel. So it is a very interesting question, but there's an easy answer. So we have not affected our water and sewer budgets and impacts on wages and salaries in water and sewer. And predominantly, a lot of that work, small amounts of it will come out of the highway department. But for the most part, we're looking at the water and sewer utility crews, in the yard doing that work. So it really, the budget cuts are separate from the impact on us helping the city out with the temporary fire station.
Thank you.
You know, we still have other things we have to meet with the consent order. I've already reviewed all that. You know, we got to keep moving on other things. We have regulatory going on. You know, we're already 3/4 of the way in planning our work for all of next year, which we're way ahead of the game, only due to, you know, the circumstances we're under. So I hope that answers your question, and I hope it answers many other folks' questions.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions, either for Director Warner or the mayor or Director Gilman? Councilor Bottomley?
Just one other question. I was wondering, is the deputy director position, has that been approved to be hired? I was curious with the leaving of Paul Raskovitz.
Yes, we've already gone through the process. It has been advertised. It's out there. We're already receiving resumes and applications. So it's going to be a process. I would say probably not filled till potentially the first week of January. But it's a position in particular where we want to screen everything real well. We want to go through the process, and it's a little bit lengthier than other positions.
Great, thank you.
Further questions or discussion? Councillor DeSorger.
Are we, this would be for Director Gilman, are we anticipating any further cuts to the budget, to this year's budget?
Yeah, just unmuting myself. I am not. We have, these cuts have been a result from the information sent of state aid cuts, increase in state assessments. We're up to the last, we're on the Senate state aid, so there's only one more to go. The last couple haven't varied a lot. So I'm not anticipating further cuts. When we get to the point of looking at the revenues, we did reduce many of the local receipt budgets for particular items, as it was very evident that we needed to do so. So I'm not anticipating more cuts. I feel the real challenge is going to be in 22 in crafting that budget. We actually have done pretty well in managing local receipts as well as submitting for our balance sheet. So I feel Greenfield's in a pretty good shape for what I see in some other communities. But again, as I state, the challenge is going to be the 22 budget.
Thank you.
The fun days ahead of us.
We certainly do. Who wants to sign up to be on this committee again next year? All right. All right, Councilor
Like
Warner.
Marlo does.
Yeah, we need a Councilor Warner. Not sure that's allowed by charter.
You want to trade? I'm kidding.
I don't think so.
I can't have another job, neither can he.
No, not allowed. All right. Any more discussion or questions on any of these line items? Councillor Elmer? Oh, you're on mute.
I noticed that some of the money came out of dispatch and fire. Can I take the fact that the chief's not here to defend his department, that everything's okay?
Well, the chief is here, so I think we'll let him speak. Does that work for you, Councillor Elmer?
Sure.
Our chief is.
Yeah, fire chief can speak to the fire department piece at least, if not dispatch.
Yeah, I'll just give you a quick overview. We anticipated, or I anticipated, when COVID started, that this was probably going to be coming, and I'm actually relieved that this is not as big as I originally was thinking. But with that said, just a quick overview of the reduction was on our department. We are not reducing any current manpower, and so you will see no difference in the amount of people that respond on calls. Where we are reducing is we had a part-time clerical that was going to assist our fire prevention officer. That's been budgeted the last couple of years, and because of reductions, it's been removed. So it's unfortunate that we aren't going to be able to fill that again this year, but it's not you know, the critical part is keeping the firefighters on the floor and available for calls. The rest of it has come through line items such as EMS supplies and some other things that, you know, there's kind of a mixed blessing with the COVID virus. The one thing is that it's causing the reductions. The other thing is that we've seen an increase in transports with our ambulance. Not necessarily COVID, but in general, an increase in transports. So our revenue is up with our ambulance. And so it's always been the goal that the ambulance service be self-sufficient in regards to paying for its own equipment and everything that's needed for the ambulance. But there are still some EMS supplies and charges that go back to the regular fund because it's regular department budget. And so we're going to be able to shift a couple of those to the ambulance revenue. And that's why one of the key items that you'll have in front of you is to vote to increase the ambulance revenue spending cap. That is going to be vital for us to be able to make this work. The other item that we reduced is our overtime. Obviously, overtime is overtime's all over the place some years. Some years it's okay, and some years it's not. Last year, for example, we went way over on overtime. This year, because of COVID, we're seeing a lot more sick leave, necessary sick leave, because if we have a firefighter that comes in with symptoms, we can't have them working until they get a retest, and so they're out. And we've had occasions where we've had people isolated for 14 days, and so we've seen an increase in that. So we're watching it closely, and we're hoping to keep it all in balance. You know, nobody feels good about budget cuts, but we certainly will do our part to get us through this crisis. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Any follow-up questions for Chief Strand? All right, seeing none. Would either the mayor or Director Warner be able to just briefly, sorry, not Director Warner, maybe Director Gilman, be able to speak to the dispatch? I'm presuming that's a position or a couple of part-time positions that were not filled. Is that correct? And is there any you know, hit to that department?
I might let Liz speak to that. I had a conversation quite some time ago with Chief Haig about it. And again, while not, I honestly don't remember the details. And I think he actually spoke more to Liz at the end of the day about how to manage this and where to make the cuts. And I think, again, it's similar, I believe, to Marlo's situation in that, you know, it'll have some impact, but it won't be huge impact on him. I don't recall I think it's a reduction in hours or something. So I'm going to see if Liz has any better information on it, but it was his suggestion. Let me put it that way. Okay, Chief. You have to cut your budget by X.
What do you want to do?
Yeah. So where do you want? I mean, that's the way I approach it, as much as does Director Gilman.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. We don't know what the day-to-day is. We don't know what the potential. If I was just to arbitrarily say, you know, get rid of a couple of your junior officers or something like that. That might obviously be wrong. That would probably be the wrong thing to do. I'm not going to arbitrarily do that. I'm going to go to them and say, what will you do and how can you do it and how can it have the least impact on the city? And so I think that that the chief rose to that occasion and figured it out.
Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, understanding that it did, you know, probably come from the chief, that we're just doing our due diligence to
Sure.
know what these impacts are. So Director Gilman, do you have any insight into that?
I do. What the mayor said is correct, but there's also one other aspect in that they received a training grant that will cover some of the overtime. So they're shifting some overtime, which is helping out tremendously this year. So And also not filling something, but that's the main part.
Good. Thank you. Okay, so we've covered the bigger cuts, but any further comments or questions or discussion from committee members? Councilor Bottomley?
This is I have a question. It's probably for either you or Director Gilman, but is it possible for the council to transfer money, like say from our meetings and seminars budget to a specific department? Or would that have to go back into general fund? Because I think that's something we might be able to give up to help aid in these cuts. It's such an extraordinary time.
Right. I'll start by trying to answer it. The training line item for counselors, which is, I want to say $6,000, and has almost certainly not been spent down this year, could I do believe that I think you'd require an order probably from the mayor's office to do it, and it might be late in the game to try to put that through. But I guess that's my understanding of it.
I'd just like to add that can be done at any time of the year to transfer from one department to another, because you aren't changing the bottom line of the budget. But it would take an order, so approximately 2.5 months. But I think that Director Warner will keep an eye on things, and if he needs some more assistance, we'll look hard, to transfer some funds to back to DPW.
I think it's worth considering.
Yep.
Just because it's such extraordinary times. I don't think that, from my understanding, it's not a penny has been spent in that account yet. And for the cuts in the services of what the community is expecting, it sounds like that it's a relatively small amount, but it might allow for a part-time summer help employee, which at least for me, I think I'd rather have that go to the community than necessarily something that we can't really attend anything because of COVID anyway. But I did think that's something that requires a motion from me or an order from the mayor.
An order from the mayor. So it would be 2.5, at the soonest, another 2.5 months, But again, the summer help isn't till summer. So.
Right. I just thought I'd put it out there because I think it might be supported by the council.
Okay.
Thanks for that.
Good to know.
Anything else before we vote on this? Okay. I'm not seeing any, so we'll do a roll call vote on this. So all those in favor of reducing the FY21 general fund operating budget by the amount listed, say aye. Councilor Bottomley, would you take a roll?
Sure, I will vote yes. Councilor Jasorger?
Yes.
Councilor Elmer?
Yes.
Councilor Forgy?
Yes.
Councilor Wheeler?
I vote yes. Thank you, everyone. It passes unanimously. We have a balanced budget. So we'll move now to page 25 in the packet. I move that it be ordered that the City Council authorizes increasing Fund 1585, Ambulance Revolving Fund, spending limit $40,000 for a revised spending limit of $120,000 for the fiscal year 2021, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E and 1/2. Receipts received but not expended in FY 2021 shall be carried over to FY 2022. No further appropriation shall be made in excess of the balance of the fund, nor shall total expenditures for the fiscal year exceed the annual spending limit of $120,000. Is there a second?
Second, Forgy.
All right, we have a second. Is there discussion? I might start things off by asking Director Gilman to just give a brief summary of this. Chief Strand spoke to it a moment ago.
Yeah, exactly. He did, in order to make some of the adjustments to his budget, he needed to have an increase in the ambulance revolving. He also spoke to the fact that the revenue is also coming in higher in the ambulance revolving to cover this. So this goes hand in hand with the fire budget cuts.
Right. Thank you.
So
we probably don't want to make one without the other.
Right.
It's obviously this body's purview, but that would be my take. I'd agree. So it's, increasing it from 80 to 120. Any questions or comments, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 That's 5. It passes unanimously. Moving on, we have a similar order on page 27. I move that it be ordered that the sum of $32,423 be transferred from 1627 bond premium for fiber and build-out equipment for the GCET Enterprise Fund. Seconded by Councillor DeSorger. Is there discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, Councillor DeSorger.
Can you tell us what's in that 1627 bond fund and where that came from, Director Gilman, please?
So we had this preliminary discussion when we were talking about the fire station. I don't know if you recall this or not, but each time the city bonds or issues a bond, there's potential to receive what's known as bond premium. Those that are generated from bonds issued for an enterprise fund need to stay and be utilized by the enterprise fund. So GCET has over $5 million out in bonds that has generated this premium. And so therefore it needs to be used on capital, which is a requirement of bond premium. And so GCET has been utilizing this to expand the network or to run fiber.
I'll follow up if I may.
Yes.
So
Go ahead.
What would be left in that fund?
For GCET's portion, 6,000. That's just GCET's portion. There's more bond premium for sewer and water and general fund, which we're voting or submitted a financial order for the fire station.
Okay. Any more questions or discussion? Okay. Seeing none, I know Director Lunt will make good use of this. He's asked me, I think already, when how soon he could get his grubby paws on it. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of transferring the funds, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Passes unanimously. Okay, and this is the last of the appropriation orders is on page 29. I move that it be ordered that the sum of $42,900 be appropriated from the General Stabilization Fund for the appraisal of right-of-ways along Wisdom Way. Is there a second?
I'll second 4G.
Seconded by Councillor Forgy. And we'll open it up for discussion by, I'll ask Director Warner, would you be so kind as to just give us a brief introduction for this one?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the Wisdom Way, we've been working on this project with the TPO transportation organization. It's going into almost 2.5, 3 years for the process. The short story is we provide the engineering, appraisals, temp acquisitions, and permanent acquisitions if an example, the road needs to be moved. So it's a long process, but it's a great deal for the city. I believe we've appropriated $284,000 for this project, and right now it's programmed for $3.7 million. So we're standing on third base, headed for home plate. Excuse the baseball analogy on this. So we need to get professional appraisals done. I think there's 14 properties or lots, parcels going up Wisdom Way. Some will be permanent easements we need to shift the road away from the wall that's crumbling and the one we're going to replace it with. Some are temporary. So this request for appropriation is for us to get the professional appraisals done, and then we'll go into negotiating the acquisition process. So I put this in. It's pretty timely. The project got moved up 4 years. I think I spoke to the council about that, and they're looking to get this thing out to bid late summer, early fall at the latest. So we need to finish this last piece in order to bring this project to the city. So that's kind of an overview.
Thanks. Yeah, and just speaking as Precinct 7 councilor, there was a lot of concern from residents there around the hill and the curve going up Wisdom Way towards the fairgrounds. People tend to drive on the other side of the road for a bit. So not only is there a potential danger from the condition of the retaining wall, but there's the potential danger of people crossing lanes. So the residents that I've talked to have been excited and glad to hear, and I'm certainly glad to hear that this project has been moved up. It also includes a pedestrian way from I believe River Street to the fairgrounds, which I think would be great for especially when the fair is happening and you get people, there's a parking crunch, or maybe folks want to save on parking and they end up walking up that hill. And right now it's in terrible condition, but hopefully it'll be much nicer. And I'm sure may or may not be part of the reason for the need for some of the easements. Any questions or comments from councilors? Okay. Well, seeing none, thank you, Director Warner. We will take a vote. All those in favor of the appropriation, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? It passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have nothing listed for discussion, but we do have some new business, and that was a request for reports on revenues and expenditures, quarterly reports. And I believe that those actually we are actually already receiving quarterly reports, and Director Gilman was so kind as to send one out. And I think that obviously there's sometimes a delay. They don't get sent out on the same day every quarter, but I do think we tend to get them in a timely fashion. And I think it's a good reminder for all of us to take a look at them, because certainly we get a lot of emails into our council folders, and it's tough to keep up on things. But maybe it's a good reminder to have a little, quick discussion whenever the quarterly reports come through. So Councilor Forgy, did you have anything further to add on that?
No, but I think it's the reason I did it was to make sure that we all knew where we stood as we go through the budget, as we see some of the cuts that are being made, and also to be prepared for what's going to come next fiscal year as well. So I think that's very helpful to all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. All right, we have no other business listed. Is there anything that any counselors would like to bring up? I know it's already 7:15. So seeing none, I will read the first reading. Appropriate $6 million for the construction. City Council first reading. Appropriate $6 million for the construction of a new fire station. That's it for us. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 15th at 5:30 p.m. via WebEx. I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Elmer. Is there a second?
Second, 4G.
Seconded by Councilor Forgy. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. This meeting is adjourned at 7:14 p.m. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you, folks, for a
Bye-bye.
good meeting.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye now.